sensitive terms. I have a very specific question. I'm wondering, because she appears to have read the eco-justice summary that I have not yet had the chance to, but there's one provision in the bill where it says the governor and council cannot make regulations that, quote, provide that the loss of non-use value, which he already has said means environmental damage, in relation to damages to the environment caused by a loss is a loss for which the Pipeline Claims Tribunal may award compensation. End of quotation. It seems like it's literally saying that the Pipeline Claims Tribunal cannot be charged with assigning a compensation for non-use value damage. Is that a correct reading, or is there something else going on here from her knowledge?
The Honourable Member for Sandwich Gulf Islands, a short answer, please.
I believe the Honourable Member is correctly reading that, but there's also a liability section I direct him to on Section 48.12 that does allow for loss of non-use value. So I think it's when they set up the Special Claims Tribunal that they are limited. And I believe you've understood that exactly right, and that's a weakness. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, you understand.
I have to say I haven't read that report, so I don't think I can. That will bring to an end the debate at this time. The Honourable Member for Sandwich Gulf Islands will have approximately 3 minutes of questions and comments when we resume debate on this bill. Statements by members, déclaration de député. The Honourable Member for Okanagan-Coquihalla.
Mr. Speaker, it's with great sadness that I inform this House that last evening I learned of the passing of a distinguished citizen from my riding of Okanagan-Coquihalla. Mr. Ivan Mesmer was a leader who gave greatly of his time and wisdom serving the community of Penticton and also the citizens of British Columbia. Mr. Mesmer served as the Mayor of Penticton for 2 terms and later was elected as a member of the BC Legislative Assembly, where he served as the MLA for our region and as BC Solicitor General. In later years, Ivan remained active behind the scenes, providing sage advice and support to other elected officials. And our thoughts and prayers are with Mr. Mesmer's families, his friends, during this most difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lille, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Rivière-du-Loup will be the host of the 2015 TELUS Cup, Canada's National Midget Hockey Championship. From April 20th to 26th, the top AAA midget players from the Atlantic, the Pacific, the West, Ontario, and Quebec will be welcomed by one of the proudest, best organized communities in the country. From hosting the first ever Quebec Games in 1971 to the Canadian Speed Skating Championships in 1982, Rivière-du-Loup has shown that it can host elite sporting events. In fact, it's in its DNA. Many NHL players, including Sidney Crosby, have participated in the National Midget Championships since the creation in 1974, including 55 first-round picks. This is an event of national importance. What's more, the local team, Les Albatros du Collège Notre-Dame de Rivière-du-Loup, will participate in the tournament with the intense play of the whole team and a captain, Raphaël Bastille, who led the Quebec AAA Midget Hockey League in scoring. We have high hopes. Congrats to all members of the organizing committee, and thank you to the players' families, and thank you to all the volunteers who make this tournament possible. And finally, Mr. Speaker, go Les Albatros.
The Honourable Member for Topic-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, and that saying will ring true this coming weekend when Big Brothers Big Sisters of Carleton, New York hold their annual Bowl for Kids' Sake. The vision of Big Brothers Big Sisters is that every child in Canada who needs a mentor has a mentor. Big Brothers Big Sisters offers a wide range of mentoring opportunities to meet the varied needs of volunteers, children, and families. Currently, the local organization has 10 matches of Bigs and Littles, as well as in-school mentoring program. Serving as role models, the mentors teach the importance of giving back, staying in school, having respect for family, peers, and community. I want to express my sincere appreciation for the work that is done by this local group led by Executive Director Mary Beth Rideout, her board of directors, the event sponsors, and numerous volunteers who make these fundraisers happen. This weekend we'll see 34 teams and 200 participants lacing up the shoes at the Woodstock Bowlcade. I encourage everyone in the local community to get out and provide your encouragement and financial support to this event that leads to the development of young people and as a result makes our rural communities stronger. While this weekend, Mr. Speaker, is about raising money, we need to say a big thanks to all the bigs who give the most valuable gift of all, their time. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday was International Women's Day, when we celebrate the tremendous women in our lives who care for us, inspire us, and fight for equality, freedom, and justice. And we celebrate the many milestones achieved on the road to gender equality. Despite the strides, women still lag behind men in critical areas, such as political representation and wage equality. Canada ranks 19th among 142 countries regarding the gender gap, 42nd in female parliamentary representation, and a shocking 100th on health and survival. Let's all recommit to fight for the rights and opportunities of women and girls in Canada and around the world. Empowering women is not just the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. When women succeed, nations are more prosperous, safe, and secure.
Let's work together to create a world where our children, girls and boys, can reach their full potential.
The honourable member for London North Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to congratulate the Minister of Status for Women, who last week led Canada's celebrations of International Women's Day and Week with the theme Strong Women, Strong World, improving economic opportunities for all. The good news is that educational achievement among women has increased their economic opportunities, yet they remain underrepresented in many sectors. That's why our government has made significant investments through Status of Women Canada in projects that support women in skilled trades and women entrepreneurs. And on January 8th, the Prime Minister announced that the Canada Apprenticeship Loan is now accepting applications. Throughout this year, I invite all Canadians to celebrate the tremendous achievements and potential of young women and girls. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week I joined the Leader of the Official Opposition and NDP Toronto Caucus colleagues at the CBC HQ in downtown Toronto. The building a Conservative-appointed board is signaling that it wants to sell off. New Democrats are demanding that the Conservatives reverse their $115 million in cuts to the CBC, which have led to 650 layoffs since the 2012 budget. Those cuts are on top of $440 million in cuts under previous Liberal governments. We're also calling for an independent process for appointing members for the CBC's Board of Directors. I frequently hear from the constituents in Toronto Danforth who are extremely concerned about the future and the fate of our public broadcaster. They want to see stable and adequate funding to keep it strong. To quote one constituent, Mr. Speaker, Nora, she says, "I know mine is a very small voice in a very large auditorium, but please promote a good, independent and effective CBC. I think Canada needs this, and I know I do. I urge the government to heed this call."
The honourable member for Niagara West, Glanbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to welcome the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy on Ebola, Dr. David Nabarro. Dr. Nabarro's visit to Canada marks an important time in the international community's fight against the spread of this deadly and highly infectious disease. Without the strong leadership of individuals like Dr. Nabarro, the goal of getting to 0 cases worldwide would be no more than a dream. When it comes to confronting the Ebola virus, Canadians can be proud to support a government that is leading global efforts against its spread. To date, Canada has committed over $110 million in health, humanitarian and security contributions to help fight the spread of Ebola. From coordinating the world's response to malaria in 1999 to managing crisis response operations in Darfur, Sudan, and in countries affected by the 2004 tsunami, Dr. Nabarro has made his life's work about protecting the health and the humanity of this world. I want to thank Dr. Nabarro for his continued service and leadership in protecting global health and for strengthening the international community's abilities in the fight against infectious disease.
Very good. The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to once again highlight the importance of organ donation. In Ontario alone, over 1,500 people are currently waiting for a life-saving organ transplant, while only 26% of the population are registered donors. Each of us can relate to the importance of having hope in our lives. When my wife Betty died in May of 2011, my personal faith and knowing that her organs saved the lives of 5 people allowed me and my family to find hope in the midst of our grief. George Marcello, founder of the Torch of Life initiative and a transplant survivor himself, has made it his life's mission to raise awareness of organ and tissue donation and to offer others the same chance he received to enjoy a healthy future with friends and loved ones. Tomorrow, George will bring the Torch of Life to the Hill. I look forward to commending George for all of his important work. I want to encourage every member, urge your constituents to register as donors at beadonor.ca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, autism takes many forms and is spread across our population with no exceptions. Often, families and individuals facing the challenges of a diagnosis need most is acceptance and community awareness. That was the goal of the second annual Espanola Autism Acceptance Espanola Riverman event that took place on March 1st. In the lead up to World Autism Day on April the 2nd, this event brought more than 150 people together to raise awareness and have lots of fun. Families from the North Shore and Manitoulin took in a number of activities ranging from swimming, bowling, and Zumba to watching a hometown Rivermen hockey game. The event was coordinated by Dennis Lendrum, who has been a champion of this issue since his grandson, Alex Bertrand, was diagnosed on the spectrum. Dennis is already organizing for next year's event. Anyone who wants to stay informed or get involved can be in touch through the Autism Acceptance Espanola Facebook page. I am sure all members will join me in sending our heartfelt congratulations to the volunteers, organizers, and participants of this exemplary event. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the NDP and the Liberal parties, our government is focused on what matters most to all Canadians: jobs, economic growth, and long-term prosperity, including for Northerners and First Nations. And that's why I'm pleased to report that on February 23rd, the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development and James Wilson, President of the Gwich'in Tribal Council, signed a memorandum of understanding announcing the launch of an innovative new training and development pilot project, the Gwich'in Internship Pilot Program. This project will provide the Gwich'in participants a year-long full-time internship program with Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada and the Gwich'in Tribal Council. Mr. Speaker, the paid internships will prepare Gwich'in participants for jobs in the public service and provide them with professional work experience in a variety of government functions. And our government, Mr. Speaker, will now continue to deliver results for Yukoners time and time again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Scarborough Southwest.
I rise today to say that New Democrats stand in solidarity with the teaching assistants at the University of Toronto who have been out on strike for a week. The members of CUPE 3902 are on the picket line seeking fair wages and better working conditions. They're seeking to improve upon the $15,000 a year they make, which includes salaries and scholarships. They're not looking to join the thousands of U of T staff on Ontario's Sunshine List or to make more money than the Premier of Ontario, like the President at U of T does. They're looking for a modest increase so that people who are actually teaching 60% of the courses at U of T don't have to be among the working poor. As the President of the U of T Students' Union put it last week, the TA's working conditions are the students' learning conditions. It's time for U of T to get back to the bargaining table, earn their six-figure salaries, and negotiate a fair deal for students and for their teaching assistants. New Democrats stand proudly in line in solidarity with CUPE 3902. Thank you.
Honourable member for Mississauga, Streetsville.
Mr. Speaker, while the NDP and Liberals want to impose a job-killing carbon tax, the Conservative government is delivering the largest tax breaks in Canadian history. With our new family tax cut, the average family will receive more than $1,100 per year to spend on their priorities. But that's not all. We've also doubled the children's fitness tax credit and enhanced the universal child care benefit. All parents, including single parents, will benefit from our plan. That's over 4 million families and over 7 million parents, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps only someone with a trust fund would think middle-class families can afford higher taxes, higher prices, which is what the Liberal leader will do. We reject the high-tax, high-debt Liberal plan. Mr. Speaker, our government will continue to stand up for middle-class families.
The honourable member for Beausejour.
Mr. Speaker, it was with great sadness that I learned of the death of Sergeant Andrew Dwaddle of Moncton this weekend. A friendly, passionate, and proud man. These are the memories shared by Sergeant Dwaddle's friends and fellow soldiers, and they show the quality of the man we have sadly lost.
The fact that he rose to the level of sergeant in our special forces shows that Andrew was part of the best that Canada had to offer.
Many people in my riding knew him while he was at École Mathieu Martin School. And I know that all in Greater Moncton are proud to have known him and sad to have lost him so soon.
To extend my deepest sympathies to his colleagues in the Canadian Forces, and we also pray for those who were injured with Sergeant Doiron. Et surtout,
in particular, I offer my condolences to the parents and family of Sergeant Doiron. Know that we are thinking of you, and our prayers are with you in these difficult times. The Honourable Member for Lotbinière-Chutes-de-la-Chaudière. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honour the memory of Sergeant Andrew Doiron of Moncton, New Brunswick. By all accounts, Drew, as he was known to his many friends, was a true force of nature. In Iraq, he led a detachment of special forces. He had previously been deployed to Niger and to Italy. In Italy, he personally accompanied veterans of the 1st Special Forces service to the summit of Mount La Difensa, which they had occupied during the Second World War. He was a fierce competitor in the International Practical Shooting Confederation, where he won many competitions. He was a man of action. Sergeant Doiron devoted his life to the security of Canada, and his courage is a source of inspiration to each and every one of us. Rest in peace, Sergeant Doiron. You will not be forgotten.
For Welland.
Mr. Speaker, today I join with all members of the House as we mourn the loss of Sergeant Andrew Joseph Doiron. Our hearts go out to his family, friends, and the Canadian Forces community. Our thoughts are also with the 3 brave soldiers who were injured. We wish them a swift recovery. This is another reminder of the heavy responsibility we have as parliamentarians when deciding whether to send our men and women into harm's way. And his family said, "Our son gave all, and through this loss, we gave all." His friends described him as passionate, determined, charismatic, funny, humble, and sensitive. These words are words we can describe our own sons and daughters. As we attempt to comprehend what Sergeant Doiron's death may mean, let us recommit ourselves to provide all the assistance we can to our veterans and to comfort all of those who have suffered such losses.
The Honourable Member for Moncton, Riverview, Dieppe.
Mr. Speaker, I rise here today to honour the memory of Sergeant Andrew Doiron of Moncton, New Brunswick. Our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, friends, and colleagues. Known to his friends as Drew, he was a force that, by all accounts, loomed larger than life. He led a Special Forces detachment while deployed in Iraq. Other deployments included Niger and Italy. There, he personally escorted veterans of the 1st Special Service Force up Mount La Difensa, which they had occupied and captured during World War II. He was an avid competitor in international practical shooting competitions. He completed successfully numerous 3-gun competitions. Sergeant Doiron adored skiing, physical fitness, training, motorcycle, and of course, dogs. Sergeant Doiron's bravery and lifelong dedication to Canada's security is an inspiration to all of us. Rest in peace, Sergeant Doiron, lest we forget.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Member for Halifax.
This weekend, New Democrats shared in our country's sadness at the death of Sergeant Doiron. Our thoughts are with his family and friends and his comrades in the Canadian Forces community, and our thoughts are also with the other soldiers injured in this incident. We stand with all Canadians as we reflect on Sergeant Doiron's tragic sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Defence give us a precise account of what happened this weekend? How did Sergeant Doiron die?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member from Halifax for her question and her condolences, and I join with all members in expressing our most profound condolences to the family of Sergeant Doiron, his comrades, and we, of course, the other 3 Canadian troops wounded on Friday night are in our thoughts and prayers. Mr. Speaker, this incident was a tragic question of friendly fire resulting from mistaken identity. Our troops followed all of the established protocols that they have for several months in these kinds of training missions. They were well within the rules of engagement of their advice and assist mission to provide training to the Kurdish Peshmerga. Obviously, our operators are ensuring that that steps are taken to ensure that there is no repeat of this tragic incident, and there are 3 investigations that we hope to see the results of very soon.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Since the beginning of this Iraq mission, the government has been hiding the truth from Canadians. At the beginning, we were told that the mission would involve airstrikes and training, but now we discover that our service people are on the front line. They are targeted by the enemy, and there are victims among our troops. The Prime Minister has to tell us the truth. How many Canadian service people are currently in combat situations in Iraq? The Honourable Minister of National Defence. Mr. Speaker, I would like to express our sincere condolences to the family of Sergeant Doiron, and we are thinking of the 3 other Canadian soldiers that were injured Friday night. Our soldiers are professionals, among the best in the world, and they have been carrying out their mandate to advise and assist the Kurdish Peshmergas. Unfortunately, the incident on Friday night was a mistake, a friendly fire incident. There will be changes made. There are 3 inquiries going on right now. Honourable member for Halifax.
Not been transparent about this mission from the start. The women and men of our armed forces, their families, and all Canadians deserve to know the truth. Mr. Speaker, the mandate for this current mission is ending in just a few weeks. The decision about deploying our service people overseas is amongst the most important decisions that we make as parliamentarians. So, can the government tell us when a debate and a vote on a mission extension will occur?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the truth is that Canada believes we have a responsibility, a moral and a national security responsibility to act in the defense of global security, of our own security against this genocidal terrorist organization, ISIL, this death cult that has sought to destroy entire minority communities, that has explicitly declared war on Canada, which is why we have Canadian Special Operations Forces in their advice and assist mission in northern Iraq. It is why we have the Royal Canadian Air Force flying sorties against ISIL positions in Iraq. Mr. Speaker, of course, we believe there is an important ongoing role for Canada to play. If we seek an extension, we obviously will table the motion in this place.
The honourable member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Mr. Speaker, Northern Ontario has now seen 3 train wrecks in less than a month. 2 of them in Golgama and 1 between Hornpain and Oba. The last 2 were only a few days apart this week. This most recent derailment had 94 cars on the train carrying crude oil. 35 of them derailed, caught fire, and several ended up in the Matagami River. The people of Northern Ontario are concerned about their safety, about the destruction of air and water quality. Can the minister tell us what measures she has taken to protect the communities of Northern Ontario today?
Yes. The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, always the safety and security of Canadians is Transport Canada's top priority. In the past number of years, strong statements and strong actions have been taken with respect to trains and the movement of goods, transportation of dangerous goods in the country. Most notably, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that we have moved 5,000 cars out of the system, that we have brought in new standards to be followed for tank cars, and we are working with the United States on a new tank car standard to be utilized in the future. We have been working diligently on this file since then, Mr. Speaker, and I would say that we need to wait to see what the response of the Transportation Safety Board is as to why this accident happened.
The honourable member.
Member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Standards Working.
On Saturday, there was another train derailment in Northern Ontario. This time, 35 oil tanker cars derailed and caught fire. 3 weeks ago, at the same spot, 30 cars of the same type were involved in another derailment. The TSB has determined that the new 111 cars weren't performing any better than those in Lake Megantic. Will the minister finally bring in stricter safety standards and protect the public? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
We took an unprecedented move of indicating that over the next 3 years we will be moving out of the system these .111 cars. We are working with the United States on what a new system will be in terms of a new tank car standard. We have changed the operating procedures for railways in this country. We have added inspectors. We have invested hundreds of millions of dollars. The safety and security of Canadians in the transportation of dangerous goods is our top priority. We work diligently on this, and we will continue to do so.
The Honourable Member for West Melville-Marie.
Mr. Speaker, before asking my question, I would like to indicate that the tragic death of Sergeant Doiron reminds us that our brave people work on service, people go on behalf of us.
Most sincere condolences to his loved ones.
Mr. Speaker, my question is, according to the CIBC, job quality in Canada is at its lowest level of the last 15 years during which these statistics have been gathered. What does the government intend to do about this problem? The Honourable Minister. First of all, we have 1.2 million new jobs. 85% of them are good quality jobs, most in the private sector. And we are reducing taxes for families and as well for companies that hire workers. The NDP believe that the budget will just balance itself, but that's not true, and it's not true for families either. So we're lowering taxes to help families.
King's Head.
Speaker, last week's CIBC report shows that the Canadian Job Quality Index is at its lowest point on record. It confirms what middle-class Canadians already know, that more jobs now provide lower pay and fewer benefits. The Conservatives are so out of touch that they boast about their jobs record. Does this Conservative government understand the findings of the CIBC report? Do they understand that the quality of Canadian jobs has reached a new low under their watch?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, here's what the here's what the New York Times actually said about the middle class in Canada, and I quote, "Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class." Absolutely. The article then compares the Liberal era, actually, and I quote, "After-tax middle-class incomes in Canada, substantially behind in 2000, now appear to be higher than in the United States." Mr. Speaker, we have the wealthiest middle class in the world. Their net worth has gone up by approximately 40%, and take-home pay after tax, after inflation, is up 10%. The middle class is better off with us.
Absolutely.
The Honourable Member for King's Head.
Mr. Speaker, the only good-paying jobs the Conservatives want to protect are their own. CIBC is not alone in raising the alarm on Canada's job market. The Bank of Canada has reported that Canada's job market is weaker than unemployment rates suggest. The bank has reacted by lowering interest rates. But our soft jobs market can't be fixed by monetary policy alone. Why are the Conservatives ignoring the facts and delaying the budget? Why don't they understand that Canadians need a real plan now for good jobs and growth?
The Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, we have a real plan. It's called the Low Tax Plan for Jobs and Growth. It has put $3,400 on average, $3,400 into the pockets of the average Canadian family. Now, the Liberal Party has a one-point plan for the middle class. Raise taxes. We oppose the high tax plan of the Liberals, but we're not surprised that they would have one because their leader believes budgets simply balance themselves. Families know that that's not the way it works around the dinner table. They know you have to keep taxes low and the economy strong, and you have to work hard to get the job done.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe-de-Lille. Mr. Speaker, in less than 1 month, trial will begin for former Senator Mike Duffy. He is facing 31 charges: corruption, fraud, abuse of trust. The Prime Minister's office is at the heart of this scandal. A number of the Prime Minister's close advisors have received subpoenas to appear, including the former Chief of Staff. Can the Prime Minister tell us how many of his close collaborators have received a subpoena, and if his current Chief of Staff, Ray Novak, will appear? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, we will continue to do everything possible to follow this closely.
Of course, this member and a number of members over there owe hundreds of thousands of dollars, in fact, millions of dollars. This member herself, I believe, owes $22,000 to the taxpayer of Canada, and I certainly hope the member will find the time to cut that check to the taxpayers of Canada.
That's right. The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Well, Mr. Speaker, those bizarre evasions won't make this one go away, because we know from the RCMP investigation that at least a dozen key Conservative insiders are involved in the Duffy expense scandal and the PMO orchestrated cover-up. So with the Duffy trial about to begin, will the Prime Minister tell us how many of his current staff have received subpoenas, and does the Prime Minister know whether or not there's any indication that he himself will be called as a witness by the defense?
The Honourable Prime Minister, Secretary of the Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I just said, we will continue to provide every possible assistance that we can to the Crown in its case against Mr. Duffy, Mr. Speaker. I contrast that, of course, to the NDP. Mr. Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition had the opportunity some 17 years ago to come forward with information that would have helped the people of Quebec, he chose to hide that information, Mr. Speaker. Again, the NDP owes some $2.7 million to Canadian taxpayers. And instead of just paying that money which they owe to the Canadian taxpayers, they're doing everything possible to hide and make sure that they don't pay it. What they have to do is come clean and pay the taxpayers back the money they owe.
The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's something watching my honourable colleague fumble through his Rolodex of the ridiculous. But let's stick on the issue here, because not only are Conservative insiders being subpoenaed, but last week we learned that a number of key Conservative MPs have been called to testify. Let's call a real simple, straightforward question. Who's going to be on the hook for the legal bills of Conservative Party insiders and MPs? Will it be the Conservative Party, because this had to do with Conservative malfeasance and fundraising and bribery, or will it be the taxpayer? It's a simple question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we know is this, is that the NDP owe the taxpayers over $2.7 million, Mr. Speaker, and it'll be the taxpayer who's on the hook if they don't do the right thing and pay off. The member, for instance, for Trois-Rivières, who owes $30,000. Honorable Mercier, who owes $29,000. Jean Lebert, $31,000. The Leader of the Opposition, some $400,000, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition, with the whip, Mr. Speaker, owes some $600,000 to the Canadian taxpayer. Make it easy. Just pay it back.
The Honourable Member for Newton North Delta.
The Conservatives allowed many employers to abuse the temporary foreign worker program, increasing unemployment and driving down wages while foreign workers were cheated and abused. But now a Conservative MP makes the disgusting claim that the real problem here is that too many brown-skinned people are coming to our country. This coming on the heels of all the fear-mongering and divisive politics we've seen from the Conservatives. How could they blame Canadians and the temporary foreign workers for a program that they have messed up so badly?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member immediately realized that his comments were unacceptable, and he has apologized, and I think we can move forward from here. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, instead of letting their member for New Brunswick Southwest use offensive and racist terms, the Conservatives should work to correct the negative effects of their temporary foreign workers program, like the higher unemployment rates and lower wages. Instead of looking for scapegoats for their mismanagement, will the Conservatives finally realize what a mess they've made? Mr. Speaker, we have already recognized that there are problems with the programs, and that's why we corrected them. We have proposals to put in place fines and even jail time for those who abuse the system, this temporary foreign workers program. We want companies to try to hire Canadians before using temporary workers, and we have limited the percentage of foreign workers that can be in a workplace. So we are working to resolve the problems, and we will continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Another sign of how bad things are, on Thursday, Résolu Forest Products announced the closing of Machine 9 at its Alma plant. This means the loss of 85 jobs and difficult times for many families. It's shocking that these jobs are going to be transferred to Tennessee. Will the Conservative government defend Quebecers' jobs, or do they prefer to see them go to the U.S.? The Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, this government has done more for the forestry sector. We have expanded markets. We have done a great deal. And we have an increase in trade with China in this area of over 1.75%. But that member voted against support for the forestry sector. In contrast, we are making efforts to support communities and save jobs.
For London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, while eating breakfast before heading to work, a Timmins father found a note from workers who are now out of work. The note was written on the last box of cereal ever produced at the London Kellogg's plant by 3 workers who had each put in more than 20 years of work at the factory, the same factory where I worked as a university student. Kellogg's closed last December, putting 550 people out of work. Why have the Conservatives stood by while so many good manufacturing jobs continue to disappear? Where is the jobs plan?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course we haven't stood by. We have put in place programs like the Advanced Manufacturing Fund, the Automotive Innovation Fund that have resulted in job growth in this country since the recession. 1.2 million net new jobs have been created since the dearth of the recession. As a matter of fact, just in the month of January, 10,700 new manufacturing jobs were created in the Canadian economy. And it's in large part because our government has kept taxes low. We've kept the Canadian economy competitive. And if my own colleague from London Fanshawe would like to know, she should know that 5,000 new jobs were created in her hometown of London, in spite of the fact that she's an MP from London.
The Honourable Member for Parkdale, High Park.
Well, in fact, in the manufacturing sector, people are being let down by this government. The job market has never been so precarious. The latest CIBC report shows that job quality is at its lowest level ever. The Conservatives are doing worse than the Liberals, and that's something. But we know that these problems can last for decades. What will the government do to finally help the middle class? Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, the facts speak to the contrary. The net average income of the middle class has increased by 44% since the Liberals were in power. And after tax, there has been a 10% increase in income for all Canadians, especially among those with the lowest incomes. We have done this by reducing taxes, increasing the child care credit, but the Liberals and the NDP want to take away all of those benefits.
Mr. Speaker, the CIBC report is clear. Job quality in Canada reached a record low this year in 2015. No argument about that. And it's declining on all fronts. After decades of Conservative and Liberal mismanagement, middle-class families are working harder and they're falling further behind.
Right.
Part-time jobs, lower-paying jobs, precarious employment are replacing full-time work. And the Conservatives clearly are in denial. Will this government finally wake up and make full-time, middle-class jobs their priority?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, low taxes and more jobs are our priority, and it is working. We have 1.2 million net new jobs since the bottom of the recession. 85% of those jobs are full-time, 80% are in the private sector, almost two-thirds are in high-wage industries. At the same time, incomes have gone up. The net worth of the average family is up by over 40%. These are the hard facts and the hard realities with which the NDP should become accustomed, Mr. Speaker. We're getting taxes down and we're getting jobs up.
The Honourable Member for St. Paul's.
Aboriginal women and girls are 5 times more likely to be murdered in Canada. Unfortunately, the Minister for the Status of Women has dismissed this ongoing tragedy by blaming Aboriginal men by highlighting domestic abuse. She has sadly demonstrated her ignorance of the RCMP report, which found that Indigenous women were actually less likely to be killed by a spouse or a former spouse than non-Indigenous women. Will the government finally accept the consensus, get the facts straight, and call for a national public inquiry now?
The Honourable Prime Secretary of the Minister for Status of Women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are terrible crimes against innocent people. The RCMP has said itself in its own study that the vast majority of these cases are addressed and are solved through police investigations. We don't need another study on top of the 40 that we already have. What we need is for the police to catch those responsible and ensure they are punished. And now is the time not for more talk, but for action. And the Minister tabled her action plan last September, and it's a very good action plan, Mr. Speaker, and it will help address and combat violence against Aboriginal women and girls.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, this weekend, when he thought he was only speaking to Conservatives, the member for New Brunswick Southwest and a former communications to the director to the Prime Minister, no less, referred to whiteys and brown people to divide Canadians. This is unacceptable. Will the Prime Minister denounce these words in no uncertain terms, and will the Prime Minister also request that the member apologize to Canadians in this House?
Yes. The Honourable Minister of Employment.
The member has apologized, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
This is not good enough. Just a few weeks ago, the Parliamentary Secretary for Multiculturalism asked Iranian Canadians why they hadn't stayed in Iran, and he was forced to apologize. This is becoming a pattern in the Conservative Party. They use racially or culturally divisive language when they think they won't get caught, and then offer up hollow, insincere apologies. Is the Prime Minister caving to pressure from the old anti-immigration Reform Party?
All right, that's it. The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, the member immediately recognized that the comments were unacceptable. He apologized. Mr. Speaker, we speak about the broader job market. The reality is that we have a good news story. We have 1.2 million net new jobs, 85% full-time, 80% in the private sector, two-thirds in high-wage industries. Incomes are up, taxes are down. We're moving in the right direction.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, the saga of the death of Corporal Stuart Langridge continues. At least now the family will not have to sue the Department of National Defence in order to get the department's response to the upcoming report in the Military Police Complaints Commission. But the family has still never been shown the results of the previous Military Board of Inquiry into their son's death. They've never been briefed on the inquiry. With the family here in Ottawa today, will the new Minister of National Defence give them the findings of the Internal Board of Inquiry into the death of their son, Corporal Stuart Langridge.
The right thing to do.
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we continue to express our sorrow with the family of Mr. Langridge for what happened, the tragic incident that occurred. And indeed, I can confirm that last Friday, the Provost Marshal of the Canadian Armed Forces did remove the protected designation for the interim report, so that can now be made public. With respect to the specific request made by my friend from St. John's, I will look into that matter and get back to him as quickly as possible.
The Honourable Member for Pont-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, the family of Corporal Stuart Langridge deserves better. Not only has his family never been shown the results of the Board of Inquiry on their son's death, but the Department of Defense waited 14 months after his suicide before telling the family that their son had left a note. Will the minister finally show a bit of decency and compassion and sit down with the family to tell them what really happened? The Honourable Minister of National Defence. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question, and we continue to have the family of Corporal Langridge in our thoughts. On Friday, the Canadian Forces decided to make public their interim response of the Military Complaints Commission as to the specific question that the member put. I will discuss this with my officials and respond as quickly as possible. The Honourable Member for Gatineau. C-51 is more and more a source of concern for Canadians and experts. Now, Canada's Privacy Commissioner, Daniel Terrien, has said that he is extremely concerned about the impacts of Bill C-51 on Canadians' privacy and the protection of their personal information. In fact, he is calling for better oversight mechanisms for our national security organizations. Will the minister listen to the commissioner, and will he be open to amendments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you to my honourable colleague for that question. Information sharing is absolutely essential. Canadians would expect that if one branch of government has information pertinent to national security, that they would be able to share that information with other branches of government. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about activities that would warrant information sharing, I'm just going to list a few. Espionage, sabotage, covert foreign influence activities, and terrorism, Mr. Speaker. The legislation C-51 that's coming to committee tomorrow has adequate safeguards built in to protect the privacy of Canadians. We are not going to privilege the rights of terrorists over the rights of Canadians with this bill.
The Honourable Member for Stormont, Wanufica.
First, it was former Prime Ministers, former Supreme Court Justices, and now the Privacy Commissioner, and even the Canadian Premier has weighed in on the risks of adopting Bill C-51. Even the BC Premier says that C-51 could impinge on the fundamental rights enjoyed by Canadians, and that if we give away our freedoms, quote, we will regret that forever. It's very hard to get them back. Mr. Speaker, experts and Canadians all across the country have recognized that this bill is fatally flawed. Why is the minister refusing to listen to them?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, Canadians would expect, if not they already think, that when one branch of government has information pertinent to national security, that they would be able and be right now currently sharing that information. That is simply not the case. It's one of the gaps that was identified. It's one of the measures that's concluded in Bill C-51. Let's talk about some other activities that warrant information sharing. Proliferation of nuclear, chemical, radiological, or biological weapons, interference with critical infrastructure, interference with global information infrastructure as defined under the National Defence Act. Mr. Speaker, this legislation already has adequate safeguards built in to protect Canadians' privacy. It's why we brought forward the measures Canadians expected.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga South.
Mr. Speaker, for several years, our men and women in uniform have been taking part in a multinational campaign against trafficking and organised crime in the Caribbean Sea. Can the Minister of National Defence update this House on the status of our operations in the Caribbean Sea to prevent illegal drugs from coming to our shores?
Great.
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Mississauga South for her question, and I'm pleased to inform members that this month Her Majesty's Canadian ships Goose Bay and Shawinigan seized over 1,000 kilograms of cocaine in a major drug bust in the Caribbean Sea. These dangerous narcotics would have otherwise landed on our streets and in our communities. We're proud of our Canadian Armed Forces members who worked with the United States Coast Guard and U.S. Navy in this successful disruption. We'll continue to work with our allies to fight transnational criminal activity and keep Canadian communities safe.
Honourable member for Vancouver,
Mr. Speaker, when the latest case of BSE was discovered, the Minister of Agriculture said he didn't think it would interfere with trade. But here we are a month later, and the list of countries who have banned Canadian beef is growing. Last week, China closed its borders, including South Korea and Taiwan. That makes 6 important markets who have now banned beef exports. Whoa. Mr. Speaker, every week that passes, these restrictions cost our farmers and our economy. Why have the Conservatives failed to protect our beef exports, and what are they doing to restore them?
The Honourable Prime Secretary, Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, our government continues to proactively engage our trading partners to ensure that our markets stay open and to reopen markets to Canadian beef as quickly as possible. With regards to the countries that have imposed temporary, and I say temporary restrictions, these markets, while important, represent a small percentage of our overall beef trade. And meanwhile, the World Organization for Animal Health recognizes Canada as a controlled risk status country, and we expect our trading partners continue to recognize this status.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. After Belarus, Peru, Taiwan, South Korea, and Indonesia, it's now China's turn to close its borders to Canadian beef, further to a new case of BSE in Alberta. By reducing CFI's budget by 20%, the Conservatives have endangered exports of Canadian beef. The Conservatives are playing a dangerous game with the livelihood of our producers, and that's completely irresponsible. When will the Conservatives act to protect Canadian beef producers and ward off a new crisis? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the World Organization for Animal Health recognizes Canada as a controlled risk status country, and we expect our trading partners to continue to recognize this status. Meanwhile, our government will continue to proactively engage our trading partners to ensure that markets stay open and to reopen markets to Canadian beef as quickly as possible.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, the Minister of Health announced, all of a sudden, financial assistance for victims of thalidomide. But this was done without consulting the victims, who were notified only minutes before the minister's press conference. And the announcement was short on details. Why did the minister not meet with the members of the working group who defend the survivors' rights before making her announcement? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, and of course these events from the 1960s remind us of why we need to take drug safety so seriously. And on Friday, the minister announced historic assistance to cover the healthcare needs. And there's going to be up to $180 million distributed among fewer than 100 survivors until that last living survivor. She's been in ongoing conversations with the group, and of course, these will be important payments, $125 million immediate payment tax-free, and then of course $168 million tax-free in an on-year ongoing support.
The member for Victoria.
The Canadian government has a moral obligation to help thalidomide survivors. They've paid a lifelong price for the government's belief that thalidomide was safe. But 3 months after the House unanimously passed a motion calling for full support, the minister announced a package that may or may not meet the needs of the thalidomide survivors. There was no consultation and very little communication from the minister. Before making the announcement, what did the minister do to ensure that the compensation would meet the needs of the thalidomide survivors?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary, Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, nothing can ever change, and we certainly have deep sympathy and regret for the ongoing struggle thalidomide inflicted. And there has been ongoing conversation since that motion passed in the House, and actually prior to that. And in actual fact, the historic announcement that the minister made on Friday, up to $180 million, Mr. Speaker, for the less than 100 survivors. And this support is going to be available until the last living survivor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Trinity Spadina.
Mr. Speaker, under the former government of Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, the Premier of Ontario and the Mayor of Ontario stood on the shores of Lake Ontario and committed to transform the waterfront of our great city. It's time for the next investment. The province is ready, the city has set aside its money, but where's the federal government? Where is the federal government? $325 million is needed, and much like the budget, the finance minister is hiding under his desk and won't come forward. Will the finance minister please commit this money, fund the floodproofing that's needed in the lower Donlands, fund the transit, and get the Unilever site off to the races? Will the federal government please commit to the City of Toronto and the province?
The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure.
With our partners, we respect jurisdiction, province and municipality. We never manage the cities here in Ottawa. We respect the fact that they have city councils and mayors doing their job. We will continue to do so. Don't worry for the Minister of Finance. He's doing his job.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent, Cartierville.
We have said that we will maintain or increase support for the CBC. That is our platform, and we have said that before, and we will commit to that. End of quote. Who said that in Vancouver on CBC's News on May 3rd, 2011? Who? The former Heritage Minister, now Industry Minister. So why did the Conservative government's budget 2012 take a hatchet to Canada's national broadcaster, slashing $115 million from the CBC's budget? Why this broken promise?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, I find it somewhat surprising to have that member, who used to be a Liberal minister during the 90s when they cut almost $400 million from CBC. So aside from the hypocrisy, we in fact provide over $1 billion a year to the CBC. And we all know that there are some challenges in the media environment right now. The President has indicated that as well. We will continue, as I said before, to monitor the situation. But I'm not going to respond to another question from a party that, frankly, doesn't deserve to ask a question about cuts.
Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Between 2010 and 2014, $131 million were left to lapse by the Economic Development Agency for the regions of Quebec. Canada is shedding manufacturing jobs, and our SMEs need help with modernization, but the government is letting sums voted by Parliament languish in its coffers. Why is the minister trying to save money at the expense of the economic development of Quebec regions? Will he at least pledge this year to use all the sums voted by the Parliament for this purpose, Mr. Speaker? Honourable Minister of Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, what he has just said is false. But NDP has a lot of trouble understanding budgets, Mr. Speaker. The money is reprofiled when it elapses, and we have announced a new program for Lac Mégantic. And I can tell my colleague that he is going to see the money again next year. It won't all be invested this year. It's a 7-year program. So, Mr. Speaker, for infrastructure and forests and communities, these are all programs over several years. So the money is still there, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't have to worry. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, the truth is that we're talking about 99% of unspent money that is returned to the Treasury. So the minister should not be telling us mistruths. Instead of diverting $131 million for Quebec's economic development, the minister should start listening to our regions. It would allow us to create jobs for the regions. I'm thinking, for example, of the enhancement of the airport facilities in Drummond Mill, which need economic investment from the federal government. Does the minister realize that his incompetence is jeopardizing the development of regions of Quebec, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, after more than 4 years, the NDP should know how it works. Everything he said is absurd and false. I was in Drummond in his riding last week to make economic development announcements because he doesn't do his job. So what those people are saying, it's false. Everyone understands that money that is not invested 1 year is invested the year after that. So it depends on how proponents unfold their projects. So the money remains at their disposal. It's easy to understand.
Mr.
Mr. Speaker, under our government, trade, investment and tourism between Canada and China have been growing to the benefit of Canadian families and workers. Could the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration please tell us more about the exciting announcement made this weekend that will make it easier for Canadians to travel to China?
The Honourable Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the hard-working member for Don Valley West for his question, for his work on these issues. Yesterday, indeed, I was very pleased, together with my colleague, the Minister for International Trade, to announce that Canada has reached an arrangement with the Chinese government whereby Canadians will have the opportunity to apply for 10-year multiple entry visas to go to China. Mr. Speaker, today, Chinese business people, family members who travel often to China have to apply for a new visa every time they go, whether that's twice a year, twice a month, or every few days. Under this new arrangement, Mr. Speaker, they'll make one application, get a visa valid for 10 years. That's great for our business relations, it's great for families, and it's great for Canada-China relations.
Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, for some time now, the situation of Haitians in Dominican Republic has been drawing our attention. People are abused in public, injustices are committed on sugarcane plantations, and there are thousands of people who are going to be deported. Can the Conservative government tell this House whether there have been discussions on this topic with the Dominican and Haitian authorities? And does the government expect Canada to play a role in ensuring the respect of human rights? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
With that question, Canada is deeply concerned by these events and the subsequent violence which is affecting both nations. This is as a result of a constitutional tribunal that could render countless Dominican-born persons of Haitian descent as stateless. Canada encourages the governments of the Dominican Republic and of Haiti to work together in good faith to resolve these issues as quickly as possible in a non-violent manner. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, since January 23rd, the Turk family has taken refuge in a church in Rougemont so as not to be deported to Turkey. They have 3 children, they are Kurds, and they fear for their safety. I spoke about this matter with the minister, but all he did was to refer the matter to other departments. The family needs action and concrete responses. What do the Conservatives intend to do for this family that is already well integrated into its community? The Honourable Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Member knows full well, Canada has a determination system for refugee status that is the most generous in the world. I cannot comment on the details of this case in the House, but I will continue the conversation with my colleague if he so wishes. But as soon as the appeal resources have been exhausted, in most cases, Mr. Speaker, we demand that the people concerned leave the country.
Member for Pickering, Scarborough East.
Mr. Speaker, hundreds of thousands of Canadians have earned enormous respect at home and abroad by answering the call to fight against tyranny and evil around the world. We know that injuries to soldiers can have a lasting financial impact on their lives and the lives of their families. Can the Minister of Veteran Affairs please update this House on what our government is doing for our injured veterans and their families?
Here. The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Pickering for the question and for his service in the Canadian Armed Forces. Mr. Speaker, today I was pleased to announce the Retirement Income Security Benefit that will help veterans that are moderately or seriously injured in the service to Canada with financial certainty in the retirement years for the veteran and their family, Mr. Speaker. I've also asked the department to take the multiple levels of benefit that are lifetime benefits, Mr. Speaker, and to streamline those into a single pension for our most seriously injured veterans, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Ombudsman and stakeholders who've been working with us on this issue that will provide certainty to families. We've been listening and we're acting, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Thunder Bay, Superior North.
Mr. Speaker, over half of wounded soldiers' health claims and medical discharges are due to MSK, that is, musculoskeletal problems. This is a financial burden on both the system and the veterans. MSK care, including chiropractic at early stages, reduces both long-term costs and lifelong pain. So, Mr. Speaker, will the government commit to an MSK strategy for veterans in Thunder Bay North and across Canada? Thank you.
Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for that question. Certainly, if a member of the Canadian Armed Forces has a musculoskeletal problem, the good thing is the Department of National Defence has chiropractors and world-class medical care, because our desire, Mr. Speaker, is to see that injured person return to service, return to duty, and they're given time to do that. If they medically release, Mr. Speaker, our system of medical and vocational rehabilitation will provide world-class support for that veteran, including chiropractic support and other services, to help them in their transition to civilian life.
Honourable member for Gaspésie, Métis. La Métis Matane Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, like hundreds of other people, I was in Rimouski yesterday to reaffirm the importance of a quality public broadcaster for all regions of Quebec. Like the people in Montreal and Quebec, the citizens of Abitibi, the North Shore, the Saguenay, the Lower St. Lawrence, and Gaspésie are entitled to information on topics that affect their communities. And we want other people to hear about us. Does the minister realize that she is responsible for protecting CBC instead of rebroadcasting her rhetoric that is hurtful and empty for the artists and employees of CBC? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I have said many times, we do protect CBC with an investment over $1 billion per year. And as we all know, there are challenges in the media industry currently. Even the president of CBC has said so clearly, but we give CBC enough money to carry out their mandate in both official languages across the country. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, we've seen a fourth train derailment over the past weeks, and this reminds us that municipalities are vulnerable because the government has not implemented adequate inspection mechanisms since the Lac-Mégantic tragedy. Instead, convoys are longer, heavier, and travel faster, and the new tanker cars are not safe. Since its bill does not address all these issues, does the Minister of Transport intend, further to the demand of the Quebec Union of Municipalities, to implement additional safety measures along with the necessary financial and human resources? The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have an excellent relationship with the UKM as well with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Without their advisory group, we wouldn't have been able to get as far as we've been and to be able to introduce legislation that really does take a look at all the concerns that they had and make sure that we listen to those concerns and entrench those into law. I continue to work with those institutions and appreciate very much everything that they've done to make sure we have a solid piece of legislation.
Member for Avalon.
Mr. Speaker, EI claimants are being told that from the date they apply for EI, the time frame of the process for the claim is 28 days. However, this process is taking much longer than the 28 days. The claimants contact my office, we contact Service Canada. We're told that additional time due to the process is claimed due to backlog. In addition, there's an issue when our office is overloaded with calls from constituents who are unable to reach the toll-free line at the call centers. Sometimes claimants are put in the queue for up to an hour, and in some cases they hit a prompt and they're cut off. Can the minister confirm that the 400 new agents have been hired as promised? If not, is there a plan to hire, train, and allocate them to areas where they are most needed in the next 28 days?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, the allocation of staff is being timed to coincide with the peak seasons around summer and winter. I can say now that we've increased efficiency in processing EI claims by 42% over the last 10 years. 2/3 of claims are now fully or partially automated, and the majority of claimants now are paid within 28 days of being approved for the claim. But our broader plan is to get as many Canadians back to work as possible. 1.2 million net new jobs have resulted from our low-tax plan, and going forward, we're going to ensure that taxes stay low so that we can create more jobs. We won't increase taxes as the Liberals suggest.
That concludes question period for today. Tabling of documents. Depot document. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36.8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 95 petitions. 95!
Introduction of government bills. Déclaration de ministre.
Statements by ministers.
Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Presentation de...
Presenting reports from committees.
Introduction of private members' bills.
First reading of Senate public bills.
Motions. Motion. Presenting petitions. Présentation des pétitions. This is the Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to present a petition on behalf of several of my constituents asking for respect for the right of small-scale family farmers to preserve, exchange, and use seeds. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I have the honour of presenting a petition both crafted and signed by the residents of Halston Hills Co-op in my riding of Burnaby Douglas. I'd like to thank Lil Cameron for her leadership on this project as well as all the work she does. The petition calls on the federal government to immediately reverse its cuts to social housing, which will result in a loss of $1.7 billion for low-cost housing by 2030. Renewed funding would allow Halston Hills to preserve rent subsidies for existing units, complete much-needed renovations, and redevelop a portion of its land to create specialized units for seniors. Mr. Speaker, I urge the government to pay careful attention to this petition. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with pleasure today I rise to bring forward a petition signed by many of my constituents in regards to the issue of small farms in the South. In particular, they're asking to ensure that the Canadian policies and programs are developed in consultation with small family farmers and that they protect the rights of small family farmers in the global South to preserve, use, and freely exchange seeds, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the efforts they've put in terms of getting the signatures. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour of presenting two petitions. First of all, that the House condemn discrimination against females occurring through sex-selective pregnancy termination, and that Parliament support M408, which condemns same-sex or the sex selection. And the other one, Mr. Speaker, acknowledges current impaired driving laws are too lenient. Looking for implementation of new mandatory minimum sentences and what the criminal code to redefine the offence of impaired driving causing death as vehicular manslaughter. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for La Salle-et-Marne. Mr. Speaker, I had the pleasure to meet with 6th grade students at École à Lyon and St. Lawrence Academy recently.
Concern about the dangers facing the beluga whales in the St. Lawrence River. They presented to me a petition to that effect, which I am tabling today on their behalf. Ils ont recueilli...
They collected hundreds of signatures from those who asked the Government of Canada to impose a moratorium on all work at Kakuna to guarantee a natural, intact environment for beluga whales and to ensure that they are protected. I am proud of the students at these two schools in La Salle for their commitment to protecting the environment and the St. Lawrence belugas.
The Honourable Member for Thunder Bay, Superior North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have once again petitions from across my riding from places like Dorian, Geraldton, Scriber Marathon, and Thunder Bay, saying that because the Via Rail route on the North Shore was cut over 2 decades ago, despite being one of the busiest